casting a flickering pattern across the luxurious mansion walls. Vine stood near the doorway, trembling. The betrayal of her parents weighed heavy on her shoulders. They had sold her to pay off their debts, handing over her to the city's most dangerous man, Jeon Jungkook, the Mafia kingpin, whose name inspired fear in even the bravest heart. She had expected someone cruel, someone merciless, and while Jungkook looked every bit the part with his sharp features, dark tattoo, and piercing gaze, his calmness unnerved her more than anything. Leave us, he ordered his men, his voice deep and commanding. Once the room was empty, Jungkook's eyes softened, but his expression remained unreadable. Do you know why you're here? Why? Her voice wavered as she replied, because my parents sold me. That's part of it, Jungkook said, stepping closer. The weight of his presence was overwhelming, but there was something in his gaze, something familiar. You don't remember me, do you? Wyan frowned, confused. Remember you? He leaned against his desk, a faint smirk playing on his lips. A few years ago, there was a charitable function at your college. You were volunteering, handing out flowers to the guests. His voice softened, and for a moment the coldness melted away. You handed me a white rose and a smile. That smile, it stayed with me. My eyes widened. She did remember that day. She had seen a tall, striking man in a tailored suit at that event, but she hadn't thought much of it. You were so full of life back then, Jungkook continued, but then I found out what was happening behind closed doors. Your parents, his jaw tightened, and his voice turned dark. They didn't deserve to call you their daughter. Wine breath hitched. You know, you know about them? Jungkook's eyes burned with intensity. I made it my business to know. They treated you like a pawn, using your innocence and kindness as a shield for their sins. When I found out they owed money to people who would hurt you to settle their debt, I decided to intervene, but not out of charity. She took a step back, her heart pounding. Why? Because I have wanted you since the day I saw you, he confessed, his voice raw with emotion. But I didn't want to take you like this. I wanted you to come to me willingly. Her mind reeled. This wasn't the ruthless gangster she had imagined. There was something more, something deeper. I made a deal with your parents, Jungkook continued, his tone darkening again. Their debt is paid. But I didn't do it for them, I did it for you. And for their punishment, he trailed off, his lips curling into a cruel whisper. Let's just say that they won't hurt anyone ever again. Wyan knees speaking, and she sank into the nearby chair. What did you do to them? Nothing they didn't deserve, Jungkook said coldly. You don't need to worry about them anymore. They will never touch you again. Tears welled in her eyes, a mix of relief and fear swelling in her chest. Why are you doing this? Jungkook crouched before his gaze softened. Because you're mine, Wyan. You have been mine since the moment I saw you. I will protect you, cherish you, and destroy anyone who dares to harm you. For Jeon, Jungkook love wasn't just an emotion. It was an obsession, a dangerous, all-consuming obsession that would either save them both or destroy them entirely. The roses were in a full bloom, their rich fragrance filling the air. Wyan had always found peace in the garden, away from the suffocating presence of the mansion. But tonight she wasn't alone. Beautiful, didn't they? Eunwoo's voice startled her. She turned to see Jungkook's stepbrother leaning against the stone pillar. Unlike Jungkook, Eunwoo's charm felt artificial. This was predatory. They are, she said cautiously, taking a step back. You know, Eunwoo, that stepping closer, you're far too pretty to be left alone. Jungkook so busy controlling everything, meaning you prefer someone with less baggage. While froze, the uneasiness in her chest growing. I should go, she said, turning to leave. One hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Don't be like that. I'm just trying to have a conversation. Let me go, she said firmly, her voice trembling before she could scream. Her voice cut through the night. Eunwoo. Jungkook's voice was low, cold, and deadly. He stepped into the garden, his eyes fixed on his stepbrother with a fury that made Wine shiver. Eunwoo smirked, but his grip loosened. Relax, brother, we are just talking. Jungkook didn't reply. In an instant, he was on Eunwoo, slamming him against the stone wall. His fist landed with a brutal precision, the sound of bone cracking echoing in the night. Jungkook stopped. Wine cried, rushing forward. He froze at her voice, his chest waving as he turned to look at her. His eyes softening, but only slightly. You are mine, he growled, his voice dripping with possessiveness. No one touches you but me. Eunwoo slumped to the ground, bloodied and groaning. Jungkook stepped away, grabbing Wine's hand and pulling her toward the edge. That night, as Wine lay in bed, her mind replayed the scene over and over, the way Jungkook had looked at her, the way his touch lingered on her skin, the way his voice dripped with both desire and control. He didn't just want her, he needed her, and for the first time, Wine realized she wasn't just a guest in his world, she was the center of it, and that terrified her. One evening, Wine found herself in the library, a room she often escaped to for a solace. She was curled up on a plush chair, a book in her lap, when she felt his presence. You like it in here, Jungkook said, his deep voice sending a shiver down her spine. Wine looked up, startled. It's quiet, she replied, her voice softer than she intended. Jungkook stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator stalking a prey. I have noticed, he murmured, his dark eye locking into hers. Her throat went dry as he stopped just in front of her, his towering figure casting a shadow over her. Do you feel safe here, Wine? He asked, his voice low and laced with something she couldn't quite place. She nodded hesitantly. Yes, good, he said, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Because I have made sure no one can hurt you here. His words should have reassured her, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. Why do you look at me like that? She whispered, unable to hold back the question any longer. Jungkook chuckled, the sound dark and rich. He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. Like what? Like she hesitated, her cheeks burning, like you are waiting for something. His smirk widened, and he leaned in closer, his breath brushing against her ear. Maybe I am, he whispered. Her heart pounded as he pulled back slightly, his dark eye boring into hers. But I won't take what isn't freely given, he said, his voice soft yet commanding. You will come to me, Wine, on your own, and when you do, you will beg me for to take you. Wine breath caught in her throat, and she couldn't look away from him. There was a dangerous promise in his word, one that sent a thrill down her spine, even as a fear crept into her chest. She began, but her voice faltered. Jungkook stood towering over her once more. Get some sleep, Wine, he said, his tone shifting back to something gentler. You will need your rest. Wine often found herself tossing and turning, haunted by the intensity of Jungkook's gaze and the weight of his word. She could feel his presence even when he wasn't there, like he was everywhere and nowhere all at once. What she didn't know was that Jungkook wasn't far. He often lingered outside her door, his hand resting on the handle as he wrestled with his desires. The thought of her alone in her room, vulnerable and untouched, drove him to the brink of madness. But he had made a promise to himself. He wouldn't take her by force. He wanted her to choose him, to submit to him willingly, and so he waited, his control hanging by a thread as his lust for her grew with each passing day. One night, as Vine lay in the bed, the door creaked open. She sat up quickly, her heart racing as Jungkook stepped inside. "Jungkook," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I couldn't stay away," he admitted, his dark voice low. He closed the door behind them, the click of the lock echoing in the room. Her pulse quickened as he approached, his movement slow and deliberate. He stopped at the edge of her bed, his dark eyes scanning her face. "Do you know how hard it is for me, Vine?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "To be so close to you and not touch you." Her breath hitched and she clutched the blanket tightly. Why don't you?" His jaw clenched and he sat at the edge of the bed, his hand brushing against her. "Because I want more than your body," he said, his tone laced with raw emotion. "I want all of you, your trust, your surrender, your love, and I will wait as long as it takes."